Muted.
So thank you everyone for attending. Again, my name is Pierre Lapointe. I'm the Customer Care Manager for nexB, and we'll have our Product Manager, Dennis Clark, present DejaCode to you today. The goal of this call and this webinar is to give you a quick overview of nexB and what DejaCode does, and we'll jump into the demo right away, probably after 5 or 10 minutes. So it's a very short slide deck, and then we'll jump right ahead in the demo and the screen sharing with Dennis. If you have any questions, there is a GoToMeeting control panel on your right. You can post all your questions in there, and we'll address them at the end of the demo. Thank you again for being with us today, and let's get started. So nexB is based in the Silicon Valley, and we have been focusing on open source governance and open source software audits since about 2007, and we have performed over 400 software audits in many languages, and lots of different code bases, as you can imagine. And today what we offer in terms of solution is a combination of commercial and open source software products, along with software audit services. The focus of today's webinar is DejaCode. It's our open source governance dashboard. And feel free after this demo also to go on our GitHub page to find out our scanning tools and other tools for managing open source software in your company. We also offer open source software audit services that you can find out at nexB.com. So let's dive right away into the focus of today's webinar, which is DejaCode. DejaCode is made of 3 main modules, which are tightly integrated together with some other useful features that we've seen our customers use a lot today. On top of that sits the product portfolio, which is where you track and report all the third-party software components that are in your product. This is where you can record an inventory for your development code base or a software bill of material for your deployed product. In this product portfolio, this is where you can automate compliance with any open source and third-party software licenses obligation, and then it will show us that in a moment. You are able to generate software bill of materials. You can generate open source attribution, and this is where you can put workflows for approval of third-party software components in your product. This portfolio is tightly integrated with our component catalog and our license library, which are metadata that we have collected from our software audit and from our consulting practice over the year. The component catalog is made out of about 300,000 component releases today, and this license library that we have is about 1,000 licenses today, including many open source licenses and many commercial and free proprietary also. This is at this level where you can define and apply a policy for your software components and software licenses. Dennis will show us that, but and this is truly one of the favorite features for DejaCode. And along with the reporting and workflow feature, all these integrated together allows you to simply put an efficient governance process within your application. As as a baseline, nexB provides you with what we call a master data for the component catalog and the license library, and you can add your own software components, but also your own software library, software licenses, sorry. And you'll see that it's highly customizable and designed to work with many existing systems. In this slide deck, we have more details about our product portfolio, component catalog, and license library. These are mainly made as handouts, and you'll see available some YouTube videos that present each of these modules for you to get back to it after this webinar. We will share, obviously, this slide deck with you at the end of the session, along with the recording. In terms of how to use DejaCode today, we propose a trial, an enterprise trial with your private database. It allows you to test DejaCode with your own data and enter your own product and apply your own policy. DejaCode is typically deployed as a SaaS model, but we also have on-premises options. And you have today a personal edition available for browsing at the URL on the slide. Our pricing is what we believe quite affordable, starting at $500 a month, and it's based on the number of products and users you will have in your system. So if at the end of this webinar you have any questions and you want to get started on trials, some of you are, please don't hesitate to contact us. So this is, a global overview of DejaCode. We don't want to bother you too long with some slides, so we'll get started right away with the demo, and I'll give control to Denis, our product manager.
Thanks, Pierre.
All right, go ahead, Denis.
Welcome, everyone. And I'm assuming and hoping that you can see the screen. This is the landing page for DejaCode. Many of you have probably seen it already. And it basically introduces you and reinforces you, of course, the three major modules that Pierre mentioned already. And we're going to get right into the product portfolio as a starting point. Now, the important thing about this is that we're looking at a fictional company. We call it Starship, and these are their products. So in your case, these would be your products, not our open source components and all that, but this is how you define your products, or someone does it for you, in the application, and so that you can manage those products and know what's in them. So this is the endpoint, what we're looking at, of the work that's been done to load those products and everything about them into the application. So, for instance, if we were to go to this one, it's just called Starship Widget Framework, and it's an example application or an example product that we've put in here. And these are some of the things that you can keep about that. Now, one of the things that I want to show you right away is that having done this, having defined the components, and we can look at some of this information in more detail shortly, but one of the important things that you get out of this process is the ability to generate attribution to meet your attribution obligations for the open source components that are in your product. And so having defined that and having these all related to items in our component catalog, and having some history of how we're using them and so forth, whether they're deployed or modified, we can now go ahead and generate attribution. So let's take a look at what that's about. Okay, so the next page, the defaults are already set up. All we have to do is hit generate attribution, but let me just explain some of your choices when you get here. We have a query system in our application that allows you to break down filter out certain things that might be going into this. Ditto at the component level, way down at the component level in case it's complicated. We've got the ability for you to decide whether or not you want to show deployed components, whether you want to see all the licenses. Sometimes there are license choices and complex licenses. Maybe you just want the simple ones. And you can, if you've got a component that has a further hierarchy, you can decide whether you want to show that in your attribution. And you can decide how you want the table of contents to look. So let's just stick with the defaults and see what we get. So I'm going to generate attribution for the Starship widget framework. And what you're seeing here is a boilerplate that you've put in for what we call a data space for your company, and the rest is what we've defined for the product itself. And so we've got, first of all, just basic information about the product. This is entirely up to you what you want to show here. This is the notice that we put on this product, and so we're showing that notice. So you're going to see whatever you've put there. And then we have a list of the components that you've decided that you want to tell the world about in your product. And so these are all here. And as you can see, it's a mixed bag of things that many of you have probably encountered in your work with open source. So for instance, something as simple as Bouncy Castle there with an MIT license, and something called Array Bounds Clamper with the BSD Simplified. And in this case, we actually show the notice. This is entirely under your control, how much you see for each component. Notice that we have one component here, Qt, or Qt is sometimes pronounced, which has a lot of other stuff under it, subcomponents and so forth. One of our choices was how much of that do you want to see, and so we decided to go for the whole thing. And I wanted to illustrate how it shows the hierarchy as well. So if we were to look at that, you would see that we have chosen the LGPL 2.1 with Digia exception for this particular use in our product. One has a choice of other licenses. It's hard to imagine you would use LGPL 3.0 in your commercial product, but you could. And so those are some of the other choices. Or you can get a license directly from Digia. And we're indicating here that we're including this in our product under the LGPL 2.1 license. And I can get to that license from here. And I can get back. And so we're showing everything that the public needs to know about what's in this product of ours, the Starship Widget Framework. And this can be saved to HTML file right from your browser, and you're ready to go. It's the, again, it's the end of the work that you've done to make that product the beautiful thing that it is. As you can see here, we have I'm sure for most of you, you'll have hundreds of items here, but we're just showing a small one just to give you an idea of what it might look like. And we've packed it up with notes and packages and things like that. Those are all optional things. It could be a lot simpler. But essentially, and also, you'll notice that there is an approval process and so forth, and there are places for review about where you're going to use certain things. And so actually there's a little work to be done on this product, and that's the whole point of keeping this in here. This is how you can communicate to your organization and manage any of the components in your product that might need special attention. And so that information is here. So that's our product portfolio. We're going to see a bit more of that shortly, but next I would like to show you, since we want to give you a nice overview of the product, our component catalog. Our component catalog, right here you're only seeing a little over 2,500 components. As Pierre mentioned earlier, we actually have a reference data collection that is provided with DejaCode of about 300,000 components, and it's growing, curated with metadata and so forth for information that you might want about those components as you can use them. And as I mentioned, we're in what we call a data space, and so we're here with just this one company. So if this is your private set, if you will, for the kind of information that you want. And everything we're seeing here is standard information that we provide, except for this, the usage policy. And we're going to talk a lot more about that shortly, but this is information that you provide. This is how you establish your policy, and it's highly configurable, and we'll talk about that as well. But let's imagine that one of the uses for your component catalog is for your product teams to look up information about it, to get the company policy, and or perhaps ask permission to use that in a product. So for instance, if I want to use this very recent version of FFmpeg, I can open that up and look up information about it. It's there. This particular line, the guidance, is something that you would provide to communicate your company policy about the usage of this particular component. And you've already set a usage policy that say we need to review this when you use it, because there are some things we might want to know about it before we just say go ahead and use it in your product. So, but we've got information about it. We've got where it comes from and the license choices that are available. We've got information about the actual package, and we've got information overall about the usage policy. This is as much text as you want. This is your usage policy. And in this case, Starship has decided that there's a group of components and licenses, mostly of the copyleft variety, that they want to make sure that we review before anyone actually uses that particular component in a product. Okay, so this is one way of communicating that policy to your organization, by having that information here in DejaCode. Now, one of the things I could do, if, again, imagine that I'm a product developer in your company and I want to use this. So I can go ahead and say that I want to do that. Okay, and I can say that I want to use it in Starship Billing, which is something that possibly I'm working on right now, and that I want Philippe to look at it, the assignee. By the way, the assignee can be defaulted in ours. What you're looking at here is a sample request form. We have provided with the product the kinds of forms that we've frequently seen in our work with various customers. And so I'm just going to put some quick things here. And these are things that you might ask for. Your request form might be a lot simpler. It could be more complicated. But it's completely configurable. We have a template thing that's available with the application. Again, if you want to see more about that, if we have time, we can show that. But basically, we have done something that, these are the kind of questions you might want to know if somebody's about to use a copyleft item. So there you have it. And whatever. We can put as much information as is needed there. And again, this is an example of the kind of things you might have in a request if someone wants to use that in their product. So I'm going to go ahead and submit that. So what just happened? It took my request, it emailed the person that I assigned it to, and it emailed a copy to me to let us know, and it has links to take you right back here to the application. And so that request is in the system. And it's possible that further along somebody want to add comments. And to that extent, they might say what those details are that they need. This is where you can put questions and keep track of what's going on with that request. you can also have attachments if you want. So for instance, we have an older one here for Starship billing that shows an attachment for a diagram, architectural diagram. This particular request was actually for someone to review and approve a whole list of components that is provided here in the application. So as you can see, we have a number of different kinds of requests that you can do, and they can be filtered in different ways by these things, and you can search on them. And this is just a small list, but as you can see, it gives us some way of keeping track of what's going on in the application. Plus, now that you've done this, when I go to the component catalog, if someone were to take a look at that, they would see this guy here. That lets me know that there's actually been request activity on this. This is an important thing that now, within the context of your component catalog, you also have a history of the various requests and the responses to those requests over time. And so I now know that someone requested the use of this on a certain date, and I can find out whether it was approved or not, or whether there were issues regarding that. So now you have a history of the kinds of requests that you might do in your organization in the context of the component catalog, and it's there for other people to use. So again, that information can be quite important and quite useful for you to be more efficient in handling that kind of requests, because you've got that history there. And you've got it, of course, on older versions of the component, which might be all you really need to do your background checks and so forth. So there you have it with our possible requests. Now, one of the things I just touched briefly on, and we can look at a bit more now, is the whole notion that you can communicate what we call a usage policy to your team. And what you see here is all, again, these labels are completely configurable. In fact, the number of usage policies you have is something that you can do, and we help you do it, of course. The little icons that we came up with, those are all available from the web, and we have a place where you can use those, and the color, for that matter. I mean, originally we started out with red, yellow, green for approved, recommended, restricted, and then added a few to make it even more interesting. Okay, so there's possibility, for instance, that you might want to have one that specifically requires the legal department to look at. And this is just some examples. I didn't mean just to pick on Oracle, but we did. And these are things that you might want to consider before you use those in an application. So there might be particular components that you want to bring attention to. You can do this very same thing in our license library. Okay, so here we're saying that this is our general policy about any licenses, that if you see this on a component, chances are good that we'll just say go right ahead and use it, or chances are not good because it's one that we don't like for whatever reason, and we might communicate that to our users what those reasons are. So those are the things. Now, the licenses themselves are provided to you by nexB, and we have the ability, for instance, for you to show some information about that. Now, I've gone to what we call prohibited licenses. Most of these, the reason they're prohibited is obvious. The license clearly states it's not for commercial use. So if that's the license that's on a component, well, not going to put it in our commercial component, are we? However, you might want to have more information than that, because you will run across these things. For instance, GPL 3.0. Here we have the usage policy, the guidance that you provided, and if you like, if you've got a URL in your company, where a page where you can have further discussion about the company's policies and issues, you can put that here. This is just an example to show that you can have a link there, and it'll dynamically appear when there is such information. Now, for instance, my guidance on that license could have said it's okay if you use it internally. So it's up to you that you can use GPL 3.0 components for build tools, for testing, and so forth. But we still might want to check and see how you're using it to make sure you're not shipping it with the product. So that's a possibility. And so, for instance, we can take a look at another similar license here, the GNU-Affero General Public License 3.0, and as many of you probably know, this one has what we call network redistribution obligations, and it's provided here in that. And that's actually text that came right from the license. So we provide the complete license text. We provide a list of requirements. These are what nexB calls license tags. What you're seeing here, the way they're grouped, the text that goes with each one, all of this is completely configurable by you, although we believe that we provide very, very standard and generally accepted descriptions of these kinds of things. These some people might call these obligations. And so this grouping, all configurable. The order of them, if you want particular things, like suppose you wanted to tag a license as saying, this has to be, any use of this component requires legal review by a legal department. And you could put that right at the top so that anyone could see that. If somebody was interested in where in the license you've got that information, we have a way of annotating the licenses. And nexB has annotated quite a few of the licenses. This is just a simple example here to show where we've highlighted why that particular obligation has, and this one has to do with digital rights management, is of some interest for this license. And again, the kind of software that you do and the kind of company you are is going to have a lot to do with how much of this is interesting to you, and which is why I emphasize that this is configurable. But we do provide the basic information. And in fact, we have a whole bunch of things that you can see on any given license. Conditions, restrictions, policies, and more information about it. As you can see, even though this is a strong copyleft license, it's got restrictions on it, which is kind of unusual. But there you have it. It's all interpretation on what truly is an open source license or not. And so we provide basically what the license writer did. We've got URLs to that, which can give you more discussion or information about it, who the owner is. The owner in this case, meaning the authors of the license. If you're interested, the Linux Foundation has a license list called that's associated with the software package data exchange format, and so we have a reference to that to get to the SPDX listing for that. And again, here is your usage policy. So all this information is available for each license, and so we have this license library that you can use and that your team can use to find things. So you can look up licenses by just about anything you think of that you might want to find. License name, owner name, various things. We have a lot of metadata on each license that helps people find them and helps people figure out what your policy is and what you want to do with that. So I should point out that all of these things, i.e. the things that we show here, these column headings, are configurable. Okay, we show this as an example of the kind of things that most people might want to do. But if this isn't all that important to you, you can put a different column there or just leave it out altogether. And if that's not important to you, you can ditto. Source redistribution is very common. You want to know that one. So we have that here, and the kinds of things that people want to know right away about licenses. So there you have it. We have, I've shown you usage policy on both licenses and components. On the component, it's referring to the specific component. So even though it might have a license that requires review and so forth, you might have decided that the component's okay, or the other way around. And so that takes precedent, of course, within your communication of your policy, that a specific component has been vetted and it's either okay to use or not okay for whatever reasons that you might have, regardless of its license. So one more thing about the license library. Pierre mentioned that we have many different kinds of licenses, and so we have a selection of very common commercial licenses. These are just mainly for reference because, as you know, it's really when you actually buy it that you have the agreement. But this gives you an idea of the kind of commercial license that might be, and this is where you could put your own licenses and for the things that you sell. We distinguish copyleft limited. There's a very controversial sort of subcategory of licenses that might otherwise be considered open source, but they have restrictions in them, and those might have to do with where you can use it, you know, the platform or something like that, and whether you can use it in a certain way. So those are here, and we have what we call the permissive, the ones that you're most going to want your programmers to use. The BSD and MIT licenses and all these many other licenses, the Apache license, are here with information about it, and there are places for you to comment on them. So for instance, suppose your organization used a lot of Apache 2, you might want to put some guidance here about some of the requirements, because as I'm sure some of you know, it requires change tracking. So if they modify it, you want to make sure you're compliant. And so you might want to have extra guidance on some of these licenses, or you may have concerns about that particular license, even though it's a common open source license, and you might want to put that. So those are all things that you might have in your license library. And again, we also have the ones that are called proprietary free. You'll see a lot of this with from Adobe, Oracle, Microsoft, Apple. The big vendors have free components that aren't really open source, and they frequently have very important terms that you want to make sure you've looked at and you've communicated to your users, your team, that whether it's okay or whether we need to look at that and whether you would prefer them to get a commercial license. So those are the things that you can do here, and people can check these out using the license list. So I've shown you a very quick view of the product portfolio and how you can generate attribution. And I've shown you, so for instance, here's another example. Again, you can do this for any of your products, and as you can see, it gives you what you need about that. And as you refine information about the components in your product, the attribution automatically will understand that. And so you're getting a lot of value here for what could be an extremely manual and time-consuming task to produce your attribution. I've shown you that you can set your own policies and say things about each of these things. That policy concept also applies. And notice that we show the policy here for the components, but it also shows you can keep track of whether people have done the reviews or whether we've approved it, and so your legal team or whoever's doing the review can determine as you go through that. And we have ways to do mass updates on things that are simple and so forth, and for you to filter them to work on just the things that you want to work on. So for instance, I could just say I want to look at those. Okay, and I can take that to a screen where I can edit those, or I could look for things that are only here and not that are simply used somewhere like for testing purposes within the product. Maybe I don't care about those. Or I could just go ahead and approve them and move on. So those are the things that you can do here. Since we have a little bit more time, I want to show you a few of our other tools. One of them is our reporting tool. So again,
Dennis,
yes,
before you jump into that, yes, there's a question on how the license library and component catalog updates are delivered to on-premises customer and prospect. Can you comment on that?
Yes, I can. Okay. As I mentioned, we have this concept of a data space in DejaCode. And right now I'm in what we call the Starship data space. When we install you on premises, you get two. You get the nexB data space, which is where all our master data is, and you get your own. And we help you set your own up. But we actually provide you full, whatever the current nexB reference data is, and we update that. And so basically you've got basically parallel sets of data going. And you can reference and look at and copy as much as you want. So for instance, I could look at everything that's in the nexB data right now. And I can see that this is the standard data, and as you can see, we don't ship it with usage policies because that's your decision. As we add new licenses, we will update the nexB data space for you, and it's simply a matter of you going, oh, that's new. I want to copy that. In fact, we have an ability for you to simply compare with there to see this is in nexB and this is in Starship. And as you can see, there are a few licenses I haven't moved over to Starship yet. And my Starship team decided to invent a few of its own, like its Starship standard terms. So you would see your licenses there. So you can do a comparison. And of course, that gets very useful and interesting as you get into some of the other things, like when we provide you with new component data or new keywords or any of those things that you can use. So that's what we do. I hope that answered the question, is that we basically refresh your reference data on a regular basis. We ship it to you with update scripts and instructions, and then you have the ability to start pulling that over into your own data space. And what we're looking at here now is the administrative dashboard in the application, where you can get to all the things that you need to configure your system and to do your updates and to do the various kinds of things you need to. So, okay, Pierre, is there another question?
Not so far.
Not so far. Okay. And if that question was not adequately answered, by all means, please put that in the chat, and I'll do what I can to address that. As I was going to mention, we do provide some reports with the application. We provide some standard reports, and standard in the sense of example reports, things that you might find useful. For instance, you might want to know that you might want to keep track of recently created components, and there we go. We can see that these have recently been added to the application, and who did it, and all that kind of thing. We have reports, perhaps even more interesting, because it's less of an administrative thing, but it provides you the kind of data that you want. A product bill of materials. And remember, we looked at this product earlier, this fictional Starship widget framework. Wouldn't it be nice if you could just get a nice overview that you can export to, say, Excel or to your other HTML or your other favorite analysis tool of choice, and you could get something like this that would show you which ones, and you could use Excel to filter and sort and so forth. What things do I need to know about? Again, I showed you all these license tags earlier, and we had quite a few of them. It's about 20. These are the most popular ones, and so those are here. So you can see that these are set by whether some of those things apply to a license and consequently apply to a component that's in my product. So you can get a report out on that, and that could help you as you are approaching the final review of a product as it goes through DejaCode. And so that's an example. Now, every report in our application is constructed of a query, and we provide a query system that guides you through how to get data out of app. You don't have to be a programmer, and you don't have to know our data model. It's a very simple query system and something we call a column template, which is what controls what we see here. So combining what data do I want with how do I want to see it, including the little headings over here, and all of that information is configurable by you. And we love to do reports, and we're happy to help people with reports for the purposes that they need to make full use of the application. And as I mentioned before with requests, we provide a group of requests out of the box that we think are the typical kinds of things you want. These are certainly some of these things, the things that we use at nexB, because we're constantly encountering new licenses, for instance. But you might have people with questions about it, and you might have people who have found a component and they really would like it in the catalog because they want to start recording what we think about that component. And there might be one that, hey, I'm all set. Would you please review my product? It's time to start doing that, and we want to track that. Those are the things that might be based on the forms that you already use in your company, and they might be in Excel or Word or something like that. But they can be easily translated into nexB requests, DejaCode requests, and therefore at that point you're connecting it with the actual data, and you're making it available to people in a database, a reportable database. Okay, Pierre, what do you think I should do next?
Well, you gave a great tour. Does anybody have any questions? Please feel free to post them in the chat. Maybe you can show the pricing page quickly, Dennis. So as we see, the pricing is based on products and users. These are prices for the SaaS model. If you wish to start an enterprise trial, you can contact us at any time, and we'll be happy to set you up with your own data space and help you guide you through the using DejaCode with your own data. We also provide the tips and other advice on how to use it best. We do have a YouTube channel with, if you're looking for more videos and more tutorials, we have a YouTube channel called DejaCode that you can find and get more information about our product and more videos. Yeah, I think that's the gist of it, Dennis. If there's no other questions, we can finish a bit early. Oh, how do you define a product? Dennis, you care to take that one, or you want me to? In the sense of what do we mean by product, or how do you set one up? No, what do you mean by a product? Oh, it's something that you sell. Okay, so, or you meaning this is where you keep your and in the terms of price, yeah, we and if you've got one product means multiple versions of that product. We don't. So that's a good question. By the way, we do provide and encourage you to put every version of your product in DejaCode so that you can keep track of its evolution. We even provide you with a nice little tool to help you compare them. And so you can see if what's changed over time. So we removed that, we changed that, we added that, and
that is the kind of thing that might help you along the way. But yes, so what we're looking at here are 3 products. Okay, actually 4, since that's just a renaming of that, but or 2. So and that's how we handle that. So it's major product line is what we mean by product. I probably over-explained that, Pierre. Anyway.
No, but yeah, it's anything that you sell to your customer, and yes, it's every major product line. But if one major product line has several releases, we don't count the different releases as different products. Anything else? Oh. Do you have any data points for expected scanner runtime per lines of code or per gigabyte? So DejaCode is not a scanning engine. I think what you have in mind is our open source scanner called ScanCode. We will have a dedicated webinar next month on the topic, and I invite you to follow it. Type in a ScanCode toolkit, Dennis.
Good idea. Sorry, I should have had that ready.
I can get more information about. I mean, I can get some data points from our team on scanning runtimes and get back to you. I will, Leonid. Thank you for your question. But yes, actually we have on our YouTube page a webinar about ScanCode. You can probably I'll also send you the link, Leonid. But yeah, ScanCode is free today. You can try. It's free and open source. You can go ahead and try it on our GitHub page. We love to hear what you guys think about it.
You can be up and running in it in about 5 or 10 minutes. Yeah, it's very easy to use.
All right. Well, I'm going to conclude on that. Thank you all for attending this webinar. We'll send you the slide and the recording shortly, either today or tomorrow. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to contact us. And have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Bye.